Ukraine has just crossed a dangerous new line. Massive strikes have hit both Russia and Crimea at the same time, forcing air defenses into overdrive and shocking military analysts worldwide. Why did Ukraine strike now? What targets were hit? And could this escalation change the entire course of the war? Stay with us to understand what's really happening. Hello, everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we are discussing one of the most dramatic and dangerous moments of the Ukraine-Russia war so far. In a powerful escalation, Ukraine has launched massive strikes targeting both Russian territory and Crimea, signaling a major shift in strategy. These attacks were not random. They were calculated, coordinated, and designed to send a clear message to Moscow and the world. For months, analysts predicted that Ukraine would eventually expand the battlefield beyond front-line regions. That moment now appears to have arrived. Explosions reported near key military infrastructure, air defense systems activated across multiple regions, and emergency responses indicate the scale of this operation. Crimea, long considered a strategic stronghold for Russia, has once again become a focal point. Ukraine views Crimea as occupied territory and a legitimate military target. By striking Crimea alongside Russian regions, Ukraine is demonstrating its growing capabilities and confidence. This development raises serious questions about how Russia will respond and whether the war is entering a more unpredictable phase. Civilians on both sides are watching closely as governments issue statements and military officials remain cautious with details. Information warfare is also intensifying, with competing narratives flooding social media and news outlets. In this section, we set the stage for understanding why this escalation matters and what it could mean for the future of the conflict. To understand the significance of these strikes, we must look at the timing. Ukraine's decision comes amid shifting dynamics on the battlefield and increasing international support. Western military aid, intelligence sharing, and advanced weapons systems have strengthened Ukraine's ability to strike deeper and more accurately. These strikes appear aimed at disrupting Russian logistics, command centers, and supply routes rather than symbolic targets. Crimea plays a crucial role in Russia's military operations, serving as a hub for naval forces, air bases, and ammunition storage. Any successful attack there forces Russia to divert resources to defense rather than offense. At the same time, strikes inside Russia challenge long-held assumptions about security within Russian borders. This undermines public confidence and pressures Russian leadership. The psychological impact may be as important as the physical damage. Analysts note that Ukraine is likely trying to stretch Russian defenses, forcing them to protect a wider area with limited systems. This can weaken front-line positions and slow offensive operations elsewhere. The timing also coincides with political developments and global attention, maximizing international impact. Ukraine wants to show allies that continued support delivers results. It also wants to signal that the war cannot be frozen on Russia's terms. This section highlights how strategy, timing, and international factors combine to explain why these strikes happen now. Russia's response to these strikes is a critical factor in determining what happens next. Official statements from Moscow often emphasize interception and minimal damage, but independent reports suggest a more complex picture. Air defense systems were activated across multiple regions, indicating genuine concern. When Russia is forced to use expensive interceptors repeatedly, it strains resources over time. Retaliation remains a strong possibility. Russia could respond with intensified missile attacks on Ukrainian cities or infrastructure. It could also escalate in other domains, such as cyber operations or energy disruptions. However, escalation carries risks for Moscow as well. Striking back too aggressively could invite stronger Western responses or additional sanctions. Russia must balance showing strength with avoiding international backlash. Another concern for Russian leadership is internal perception. Strikes on Russian soil challenge narratives of control and stability. Even limited damage can have outsized political effects. Crimea holds symbolic value, and repeated attacks there undermine claims that it is fully secure. Military planners now face difficult choices about redeploying forces. Every system moved to protect Crimea or border regions is one less available at the front. This redistribution could alter battlefield dynamics. In this section, we examine how Russia might respond and why each option carries serious consequences. The international reaction to Ukraine's strikes has been closely watched. Western governments generally frame Ukraine's actions as self-defense within an ongoing war. Many officials emphasize Ukraine's right to target military objectives linked to attacks on its territory. At the same time, there is quiet concern about escalation. Allies want to support Ukraine without triggering a wider conflict. Statements are often carefully worded to maintain this balance. NATO officials stress that they are not direct participants while continuing military assistance. Meanwhile, global markets and energy sectors react nervously to any sign of expanded conflict. Increased volatility reflects fears of supply disruptions or further instability. Countries outside the West are also watching closely. Some see these strikes as evidence that the war is far from resolution. Others worry about precedents involving cross-border attacks. Diplomatic channels remain active behind the scenes, even as public rhetoric hardens. Media coverage varies widely depending on political alignment, shaping public opinion worldwide. Social media amplifies dramatic imagery, sometimes without full context. This creates confusion and competing interpretations. Ukraine aims to control the narrative by highlighting military targets and strategic necessity. Russia counters with claims of provocation. This information battle is now inseparable from the physical one. This section explains how global reactions influence decisions and shape the conflict's trajectory. Looking ahead, these strikes may mark a turning point in how the war is fought. If Ukraine continues targeting Crimea and Russian territory, the concept of safe rear areas disappears. This could fundamentally change military planning on both sides. For Ukraine, sustained pressure could weaken Russia's operational capacity over time. For Russia, defending a broader area could stretch forces thin. However, risks remain high. Escalation can spiral quickly, especially if miscalculations occur. Civilian safety remains a major concern as both sides accuse each other of endangering populations. International mediators may intensify efforts to prevent uncontrolled escalation, but trust is low. The battlefield will likely remain dynamic, with periods of intense action followed by strategic pauses. Technology, intelligence, and external support will continue to shape outcomes. Ukraine's ability to strike deep reflects adaptation and resilience. Russia's response will reveal how much flexibility it retains. For viewers trying to understand this war, it is important to look beyond headlines. Each strike fits into a broader strategy influenced by politics, resources, and morale. The coming weeks may provide clear answers about whether this escalation leads to advantage or stalemate. In this section, we focus on what these developments could mean for the future and why the conflict remains so unpredictable. Another critical aspect of these strikes is the role of modern technology and intelligence. Ukraine's ability to hit targets in Crimea and deep inside Russian territory depends heavily on accurate, real-time information. Satellite imagery, drone surveillance, and advanced targeting systems allow Ukrainian forces to identify high-value military assets. These tools reduce guesswork and increase strike effectiveness. Precision matters because it limits wasted resources and strengthens Ukraine's narrative that it targets military objectives rather than civilians. Drones play a particularly important role. They are cheaper than missiles, harder to detect, and capable of overwhelming air defenses through numbers. Electronic warfare is also shaping the battlefield, disrupting communications and radar systems. This technological layer adds complexity to the conflict and shortens reaction times. Russia has its own advanced systems, but defending against constant threats from multiple directions is difficult. Each successful strike demonstrates learning and adaptation by Ukrainian forces. Western training and technical support contribute to this evolution. However, technology alone does not decide wars. It must be integrated with strategy, logistics, and morale. Ukraine's use of technology signals a shift toward long-term pressure rather than short-term shock. This section explains how intelligence and innovation are changing how the war is fought and why these strikes are possible now. Public perception inside Ukraine is another important dimension. For many Ukrainians, strikes on Crimea and Russian territory represent a sense of justice and resilience. Years of conflict, displacement, and loss have hardened public resolve. These attacks reinforce the belief that Ukraine is not merely defending but actively shaping the battlefield. Morale plays a powerful role in sustaining a long war. Visible actions boost confidence and national unity. At the same time, Ukrainian leaders must manage expectations. Military success is rarely immediate or decisive. Overconfidence can be dangerous. Communication with the public focuses on realism and endurance. Civil defense measures remain in place as retaliation is expected. Inside Russia, the reaction may be more complicated. State media often downplays attacks, but information still spreads through informal channels. Fear and uncertainty can grow even when official narratives attempt control. Strikes challenge the idea that distance equals safety. This can affect public support and political stability. Both governments understand that perception influences endurance. Winning the narrative is almost as important as winning battles. This section explores how public opinion on both sides is shaped by these strikes and why morale matters so much in prolonged conflict. Economic implications are also tied to this escalation. Warfare at this scale drains resources rapidly. Every missile intercepted or launched represents significant cost. For Russia, defending Crimea and border regions requires sustained spending on air defense, repairs, and logistics. Sanctions already strain the economy, making prolonged defense more difficult. Ukraine also faces economic pressure, relying heavily on international aid. However, demonstrating effective use of resources strengthens arguments for continued support. Global markets respond quickly to perceived instability. Energy prices, shipping routes, and insurance costs can all be affected by expanded conflict zones. Crimea's location near major shipping lanes adds to these concerns. Any disruption in the Black Sea has international consequences. Governments and investors monitor developments closely. Economic warfare, including sanctions and trade restrictions, operates alongside military action. These tools aim to weaken the opponent's ability to sustain operations. Over time, economic strain can influence political decisions. This section highlights how the battlefield extends into finances, trade, and global markets, reminding viewers that war impacts far more than soldiers alone. From a strategic perspective, analysts debate whether these strikes represent a temporary escalation or a new normal. If Ukraine maintains pressure on Crimea and Russian territory, it signals confidence in long-term capabilities. This could deter some actions while provoking others. Russia may seek asymmetric responses, using cyber attacks or influence operations rather than direct military escalation. The unpredictability of responses increases risk. History shows that wars often change character over time. What once seemed unthinkable becomes routine. Both sides test limits, learning what the other will tolerate. International actors attempt to draw lines, but enforcement is difficult. The danger lies in misinterpretation. A strike intended as deterrence may be seen as provocation. Communication channels, even informal ones, become vital to avoid unintended escalation. Strategic patience may compete with domestic pressure for decisive action. This tension shapes decisions. This section examines whether the war is entering a new phase defined by deeper strikes and broader fronts, or whether restraint will eventually reassert itself. In conclusion, Ukraine's strikes on Russia and Crimea mark a significant moment in the ongoing war. They demonstrate evolving strategy, growing capability, and a willingness to challenge assumptions about distance and security. These actions carry risks, including escalation and retaliation, but they also aim to reshape the battlefield and the narrative. Understanding this event requires looking beyond dramatic headlines. It involves strategy, technology, economics, public opinion, and international politics. No single strike decides a war, but patterns over time reveal intent and direction. Viewers should remain cautious about misinformation and seek context from multiple sources. The coming months will show whether this escalation produces tangible advantages or leads to stalemate. What is clear is that the conflict remains dynamic and unpredictable. Decisions made now will echo far into the future. This final section brings together the key themes discussed and emphasizes why continued attention and analysis are essential for understanding what lies ahead. If you found this analysis useful, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Share your thoughts in the comments and let us know what topic you want covered next.